I started to realize, people weren't coming for me, but I'm also not necessarily homestead material. Very much a designer bag, but now I keep my chicken in a designer bag. So everybody's adaptable in some way to homesteading. And we moved down to Nashville right here about an hour away, and we live actually inside the city of Nashville. And the purpose of doing that was that we wanted to give our kids access to private school education when it became too much for me to homeschool them. But in addition, we sort of just loved the city. We like to be able to go to concerts. We like to be able to go to the museums. But at the same time, we wanted to be able to, if things went to shit, we wanted to be able to make sure that we would survive. And so when we bought our house, we bought it with the express idea of making it into a miniature homestead. And this is a little bit different from being able to move where you have 20 or 30 acres or even 5 or 6 acres. We figured when we started that we would need 3 acres to have a decent homestead with livestock. And so far, we've done it in just under a half acre. So what you see here is actually a graph of my backyard. So here's my house, which is constantly falling down. We live in a 100-year-old house in East Nashville. You can go down my street and end up at a bus stop, see homeless people, get your checks cashed, get your CBD, whatever you need. That's all the way at the end of my street. But if you come into my backyard, it's an entirely different story. We started this project about 2 years ago when we first moved into our house. We had done some experimentation in Chicago when we were living there. But Chicago really has a lot of restrictions on what you can have in your backyard, how much of it you can use, what your setbacks are. I mean, all these laws that didn't make any sense, whereas Nashville doesn't have those things, which is where this came into play. So what you see here is basically an entire, about a little over a third of an acre in our backyard that is entirely homesteading. Right here, we have our massive garden. This is our food garden. And then we have 2 kitchen gardens. And then we have a wheat field. And we have a 3 Sisters garden. Our pollinator garden, our potatoes. Right here is corn. And then right here you see this is all olives, figs, and wine. Because if you're going to be like me, when the shit hits the fan, you're not going to be able to survive without your wine. We also have started in distilling, and we're going to be working on mead making in the next couple of years.
Did you say olives?
Olives, yes.
In Nashville?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, my Substack is called Growing Olives in Nashville. We worked with the University of Tennessee's Ag Extension to find a variety that would work for us. We ended up with Arbequina olives. Okay. Similar climates. Huh?
Those are going to end up going in here.
Yes.
It's
Mine probably kills them, but you probably can grow them if you can.
Yeah, I can grow them in my backyard, so I'm sure that you can, because my backyard is just bus smoke and all sorts of disasters. But Arbequina olives, I think it's Piccoon olives also grow in this environment. Anything that grows in the olive regions in Spain, we found out, can be transferred here to Nashville. We also have fig trees and vines. Vines are going in this year. In fact, the reason I'm late to this is because we're putting in the 3 Sisters garden and the vines just this year. In addition, we're chicken scofflaws. We have lots of chickens, which has been very useful for 2 reasons. One, we love having chickens. The second is I'm paying off all of my neighbors in eggs, because quite honestly, nobody wants to live next door to this. We also have our pollinator garden, our potatoes, and the potatoes also have a sunflower garden because I needed something for my kids. But I am growing all of this with children who are 5, 5, and 4. So they are growing up in the ability to see where their food comes from, and to take part in the entire process of food creation to such an extent, and it's been so popular with us that our school is actually bringing me on next year as a teacher to create this same environment in their school so that their school can have fresh food in their cafeteria and for their food pantry. I guess mostly it would probably be easiest to do sort of a question and answer because this is crazy.
How do you spell that, Olive?
Arbequina.
That was close. Thank you.
And the other olive that you can grow here is Pictwell.
Can you explain what the K and the V are and the WN
Sure.
are? All that.
So these are our greenhouse, which we did. We did not have the first year. We discovered that the easiest thing to do and the easiest way to save money on all of this, knowing that this was going to be an investment, we started with a greenhouse. And that can be like a greenhouse from Aldi. So when I'm going off to a school to teach them how to do this, I'm basically bringing a plastic greenhouse from Amazon. Now, this year, we are putting in a fully, plexiglass greenhouse that is going to be sunken into the area here where we had at one point dug out a crawl space. So the greenhouse is going to go in here, and that's also really necessary for the fruit trees. We lost a bunch of figs the first few times that we were doing it because figs are stupid over the winter, and some of them love it and some of them don't, and so you have to bring them into a controlled environment. So we decided that a greenhouse was probably the best form of investment that we could make on this. This is an outdoor kitchen. So we do have an outdoor kitchen because the intention is eventually to have people into this backyard and show them that you can actually grow most of your own food in your own backyard in Nashville, including your wine and your olive oil and your figs. Sadly, we don't have the ability to make prosciutto, which would make that meal complete. However, we do have a friend 2 streets over who's doing that. So one of the great parts about being an urbanite is that there's lots of secret urban agriculture going on all around you. And they're often willing to go on a barter system. Because if you can give somebody eggs, especially in an egg shortage, they're often willing to hang a ham for you in their own garage, which has happened quite a bit. So it's been a really great way of getting to know our neighbors also in an urban environment. Because I think a lot of times people want to be homesteaders, but they don't want to leave the comfort of a city or some of these things just yet. I mean, we're going to get to a point where we can't take it anymore too. I think it's only a matter of time before we drop it all and go off about an hour this direction. In fact, I was looking at houses for sale on the way up here today. But you have to kind of be able to put your toe in the water a little bit. And it's a little bit easier to do it when you can do it in your own backyard. We did discover last year that we probably actually could subsist on what we had, but we would be eating a lot of beans. And a lot of beans, not just like every meal.
Not just a few beans.
Not just a few beans, like literally every meal. We did, one of the big things that we have done is also plug into the Foxfire Network. So the Appalachian organizations that track how to preserve and how to continue to move your permaculture along. They showed us how to make leather breeches out of green beans, which taste enough like meat that my kids did not spit it out. So we would, if things really got dire, we probably would be able to. One of the things that we've also adapted is the Three Sisters Garden. I'm sure you guys, if you haven't heard of it, it's an indigenous form of subsistence garden, mostly in the Appalachians. It is corn, beans, and squash. And it makes up whatever our winter wheat doesn't give us, the Three Sisters Garden does give us. So we have food for all winter. Our winter wheat is the only thing that we have that is planted in the fall. That's planted in the fall. It's harvested around now. It's starting to look like it's ready to harvest. And then this small 20 by 20 patch actually is enough flour to sustain us for an entire year. And that was very shocking. We also learned like how little food you really need to get you through a year. But this 120 by 20 patch here is enough flour, soft red flour for us to get through a full year.
So when you started, was it 3 years, 4 years ago?
3 years ago.
When you started this, you didn't really know how to grind wheat and bake bread, right?
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So
I came into this.
tell us what the journey looked like from, I think I'm going to turn my yard into something that will sustain us completely. To, like, what things have you taken on and what have you?
So
learned
I
about
have,
yourself?
Nicole, you knew me.
Yeah.
Very
Very bougie.
bougie. The fact that I'm wearing Birkenstocks today is just, what? I don't know. So I grew up, my grandfather was a winemaker. I'm only about 2 generations removed from farming goats on a hillside in Italy. They came over in 1949 and I learned everything, but my grandfather died when I was 6. So what I learned was all by sensory, all senses, tastes, and feels. But it was amazing how much that came back and what information was communicated through all of that when I was growing up. To do this, I literally had to probably lose my mind. I had a medical emergency and almost died. And I was like, guess what? I'm going to build a garden in my backyard and we're going to subsist. You do have to go a little crazy. But I mean, that is the reality of homesteading. Like, you do have to be a little bit crazy. I have taken on everything from learning. I started with chickens last year. I'd never even held a chicken in my life, and I hatched some chickens out of eggs and took care of them until now they're my primary producer. And then this week I learned how to cull my flock. So it's a long process. But you take somebody who was raised in Detroit, raised in Chicago, raised in a city, never touched most of her food before. And it's just a slow process. It's been a slow process. I've learned about pollinators. I've taken a lot of classes at the University of Tennessee's Ag Extension. I've done a lot of trial and error. I was telling a friend at breakfast that we planted all these zucchini, right? Because I figured everywhere that I've ever lived, zucchini was so plentiful that I was like dropping it off on neighbors' doorsteps in the middle of the night. I didn't want any more zucchini. And then we did this, and last year I got 6 cases of okra and 1 zucchini.
Welcome to squash borer.
Yeah, I'd never heard of a squash borer before.
Yeah.
And I cracked open my thing, and all these little things came out, and I fed them to my chickens. And I had to learn about squash borers. We learned about the Three Sisters Garden and some of this Appalachian stuff from a Michelin star chef who operates in Nashville, Sean Brock. My husband is friends with him, and he introduced us to a whole new world, mostly his mom. His mom taught me how to find edible plants. She taught me how to do this Three Sisters Garden, and they directed me to Foxfire. So it's been one of these things where I've just had to learn it all from the ground up, and I cannot believe that we can live the way that we live on just a third of an acre. And if I can do it, I truly mean this, if I can do it, literally anybody can do it. Because for me, camping, roughing it is a hotel that has doors on the outside instead of in the hallway. I'm not camping material. And here I am every day going out in my Carhartts and my Birkenstocks and doing this in my backyard. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. And I think that that's kind of the process for this is if you have a plot of land, you can do it. And you can have chickens and they will take a giant crap in your laundry room sometimes because you just don't have a lot of room. But you can do it.
So
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What's the soil situation? Is most things in ground? Is it in containers? And like, how was your soil when you moved in versus now?
That's a really good question. So we have clay soil, just like everybody else in the
Yeah.
South. This is all a container garden. So we have 4 containers on each side, then 2 right here with an arch, 2 right here with an arch. One of the benefits of having chickens is they provide manure for your boxes without you having to try. But what we do is we do a lot of soil testing, and we had to learn how to test soil. We had to learn how to understand the soil's microbiome, which is something that I had never heard before coming to gardening. All of a sudden, I have these container gardens, and someone says, well, what's your soil content? And I was like, I don't know. It's clay and some pieces of old pottery that they used to, we have a hole in our backyard right next to what used to be the outhouse that people threw broken pieces of pottery in for years. So my soil was like 10% spode pottery. So we had to dig that all up. We found some cool stuff. I mean, but we had to dig that all up. And then each of these container gardens had to be assessed. And now we spend the winter time working on the microbiome of the soil. And what's very funny is when I went to go start teaching at my kid's school, they said, well, you can do the fall semester, but I don't think there's anything for you to do in terms of teaching gardening for the spring semester. And I was like, oh, you have no idea. We're going to seed start. We're going to look at soil content. We're going to look at all these moisture levels and what's living in my soil and what is composting. So we had to also learn all that. We learned composting from the beginning. We bought literally a plastic compost bin, and we started filling it with stuff, and we had to learn brown and green. And my kids are 5, and they can tell you what goes in the compost and what doesn't go in the compost because somebody is a meat eater in our house, and that their poop can't go in the compost. So this is all done. Now, for anything else that has to be planted in the ground, so that includes the olive trees, the fig trees, any fruit trees. We have blackberries and something native growing on this. I think it's blackberries and some huckleberries. Yeah, blackberries and huckleberries growing on this.
Mulberry?
We have mulberries too, but just one. I don't know. I got poison ivy when I tried to harvest it last year. So you see how great I am. I didn't even know what poison ivy looked like when I started, which was, a hard lesson to learn, right? So any of these, especially for what I have V here is vines, and that is wine grapes. All of that has to be really, really specifically controlled. So the vines here, we actually had somebody come out and assess our soil before we put vines in, just because we wanted the same vines that we could get in the area where these olives grew. We didn't want to grow fruit wine. We wanted to have like a real wine. So we had to be really careful and have somebody come out and scientifically test that. But that's why this is a big, there's a big terrace that goes, or I don't know what you call it, gazebo that goes over this, where the vines are.
When you say we are doing the garden stuff, specifically who is setting foot out in there and who is doing what?
Oh.
How much time are they doing?
That's a great question. So it's myself and my husband, and 3 children who do not help, or they do help, but it's not really great. So it's myself and my husband, and we have taken on this entire project. I am really lucky. I stay at home with my daughter, so I work from home, and I'm home all day, every day. It takes up quite a bit of my time in the summer, but we have everybody working to do whatever we can. And the more every year my kids get a little bit more capable, a little less likely to kill a chick when they hold it in their hands, a little less likely to pull all of the carrots up. We're getting a little bit better every year. And it takes a little bit less time. Now we've found 3 years into this project, I think the planning stages are more than they were when we were just throwing stuff at a wall. When we first started this project, we just did what you would find in a regular garden. We went to Home Depot and we got, red peppers and tomatoes, and we just did whatever. But now we've gone to heirloom varietals, things that are designed specifically to grow in the soil that we have. We brought over for tomatoes. I'm 100% Italian, so I imported San Marzano tomato seeds from San Marzano. We've done more seed starting as time has gone on, but it's a family affair. Our neighbors really benefit from this because we get like more cucumbers and pickles and things than we can eat, and so we hand them through fences and stuff, but it's really just us. Oh, I saw. Okay, I'll say. You can go first, and then I'll grab him. I just remember.
I just wonder, like, when you started, as far as like orientation or southeast west, like, did you have a plan for your garden?
We did.
Because sometimes, like, people set things down, and then later they're like, "Oh, I have to move this." So, can you kind of?
We went when we picked our house. We picked it with specifically a sun-drenched backyard. This gets 100% sun all day. The only areas that don't get sun are right here because our neighbor has some ugly ornamental bushes all along this. So it casts shade, but we're able to then put potatoes in that area. So the potatoes have grown in the shade. We've adapted as time has gone on too, and we have a front yard that we would love to get rid of the lawn in the front yard. We would just love to get rid of it. But it's completely shaded by a giant 100-year-old pine tree. So we will have to do more work when it comes to figuring out what to put in the front yard. Because to me, that's just a bunch of wasted space that I could be using for food. I'm sure my neighbors will, again, love it. But now we have signs out there that say we're a Tennessee Smart Yard and a bunch of other things. So they can't come at me because I'm an environmentalist. Yeah, that we're gonna have a much bigger problem when we do that front part. I know he had a question.
Yeah, what challenges do you have with urban animals like squirrels, raccoons, and how do you deal with that?
So my number one arch nemesis is bunny rabbits. They can get into anything. Chickens I can keep out of anything. I've learned I did not know that this is one great thing. I didn't know that chicken wire didn't keep chickens out. I had always assumed chicken wire was for chickens, right? No, you need hardware cloth. So I learned the magic of hardware cloth. We are fenced all the way around. My entire property is fenced up to 10 feet. It isn't the most aesthetically pleasing thing, but it keeps pretty much everything other than possums. And we have hawks, but we have one of those spaghetti noodle guys that you see in front of the CBD store. It's just done really well to keep hawks away from our chickens, and nobody asks any questions because we live in East Nashville. They just think I'm selling pot out of my backyard instead of chickens. Yeah, we have a wacky Willie. Actually, we last year we were using hemp bedding for our chickens, and we couldn't figure out who was smoking the skunky weed in our neighborhood, and it was actually us because our chickens were peeing into hemp, and it was smelling like really skunky weed in our backyard. So that's another thing we've discovered. My number one is rabbits, and I turn out my rescue pit bull and just don't ask a lot of questions. But yeah, I have a rescue pit bull. She's wonderful. She's terrified of chickens. She'd get the hell out of everywhere that the chicken is. She was once attacked by a chicken, took out her face. So she takes care. I also have a really great indoor-outdoor cat who has an air tag on him. And he has been instrumental in handling my rabbit problem as well. The one thing I cannot do is shoot the rabbits. I do live in Nashville, and they would probably come get me.
Can you use a BB gun?
I can't.
You come to the right place.
We have thought about the high-powered air rifle has been mentioned. The high-powered air rifle.
Dogs also love to eat rabbits.
Our cat loves to eat rabbits. The thing that got me the ability to call my chickens, which was something I never thought I was ever going to do, was I had to put several small rabbits out of their misery last year because of my cat. So that just introduced me to the world of murder. And now I am a serial killer of birds. They should fear me.
Did you do YouTube University for learning how to color chickens?
No, I just
Have a friend?
I had just had a friend, and we did it together, and it was wonderful. And now I have a chicken that I'm after. I'm like, screw up, and I'm coming after you.
Usually it's north on your property.
Which way is this? Is north.
Okay.
On the air rifle,
Thank you for that.
Sorry.
on the air
That's actually
rifle,
great.
Well, it's
What a
like-
great orientation.
Yeah, we have a great
Weather
orientation.
vane up there now because you drew a chicken.
Oh, yeah.
So just a quick note on that. When I'm training designers, north must be the top of the map. If you do it any other way, I fail you. Now, there's a reason for that.
Tell him he's welcome to tilt the board.
You can tell my house.
I know why, yeah.
When you get to looking at it, you will subconsciously,
Think
by
it's
looking
north.
at things, know where the sun is going to be. You're going to know where the rains are coming from. You're going to know where the wind is coming from,
Yeah.
and so forth. So it's always, even the southern hemisphere, north is always at the top of the drawing.
Mhm.
And once you get used to that, you will. That's why I was like looking at. I can't even. I don't even
Sorry.
have to make sense of it. Now that you got that, I can make sense of your
Yeah.
drawing, right? I can tell where the sun is down there.
So you know that all of your weather comes from this side.
Yep.
Also, a new thing that I learned is weather, rain gauging. I used to thought it just happened.
Yeah.
It does not just happen. It's the Beverly Hillbillies, but it's the other way around. Like, if you think about my husband, it's actually Green Acres, but I'm Zsa Zsa Gabor, and I do most of the work. But that is, or Ava Gabor, I guess. But yeah. So this is back there, all the way back.
You were mentioning the hardware cloth for chickens.
Yes.
What's how do you keep them out of your garden beds, basically? What's that look like?
So they're allowed in all of this area. They have decided that they don't like tomatoes, they don't like okra, they don't like peppers. Anything that is chicken safe is planted here. Anything that is not chicken safe, which is any kind of cabbage, so broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage of any kind that is like chicken crack, and we have to keep that. We have to keep that inside hardware cloth or in a bed that's a little bit raised. My chickens don't like to fly. We had one that got up on the fence and then couldn't figure out how to get down, and it was a whole thing, and I had to pull her down, and yeah, the brain cells were really working that day. They don't like to fly, so we tend to put things in higher level raised gardens for things like broccoli and cauliflower. One of our projects, and this is probably going to come in the next year, because right now we're working on how to get this to the table really fast and have people in our backyard to do dinner parties and, see what we can do here in Nashville. One of our next steps is to actually enclose this on most sides so that we are chicken safe when we want to be. Because right now they're malicious destructors of property.
How big is that area?
This is about 50 feet by 50 feet.
Okay, so it's not that expensive.
It's not that exposed. Yeah, so it won't be that expensive too. This is the food for our family.
So, has there been a change in the insects, particularly the ticky, chiggery ones, from when you moved into now?
Oh yeah, we don't have ticks anymore. My chickens eat the ticks. Chiggers, we had more. I don't know if chiggers is a cyclical thing. My children used to go into bushes more and get chigger bites. That is less as they've gone on. We do have to do mosquito buckets of doom everywhere we go. We have those all over our property. We confuse the neighbors as to why there's like Home Depot buckets just sitting in our yard. But we have done that.
When you say buckets of doom, you mean BT and water?
Yes.
Okay.
We just call it the mosquito bucket of doom. I'm sorry, I used a colloquial term from my own family, but we call it the mosquito bucket of doom because otherwise my kids will go in it. Yeah, like unless I want, it's standing water, so like, come on. So we do have the mosquito buckets. We do use Japanese beetle traps, which I wasn't sure that we even had Japanese beetles until we got the traps. And then we ended up having tons of Japanese beetles, which the chickens think are a delicacy. So it's just a big old circle of life. And it works really well. We use we've learned all of this from the ground up. So other than reading a couple of Joel Salatin books, like we were just like, oh, we're just going to try and start it. But we've used less and less pesticides as we've gone on.
I'm assuming your chickens can't read. So how do you get your chickens from the chicken area to this area back and forth?
They free range. We
So
do
they
have
get to the whole backyard.
This isn't a great. I should show you. There's a big run. There's a big chicken run. They are allowed to free range, except for the wheat field and the Three Sisters plot. Those are the only things that we really cordon off from chickens, and that's because they would eat us out of house and home otherwise. So the chickens free range. They do have this big, and then this is a shed right here, which they have some shelter and go underneath that. And then this is also our brooder and our pen for young chickens.
You said you had rabbits earlier?
We're getting
Oh,
rabbits.
you're getting rabbits. Where
Yeah,
did you put
so
them?
they'll be back here in this. This is our little rabbit hutch. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
He's behind
He's behind a pole and I can't see him.
Talk about bean varieties for Three Sisters, because most modern pole beans in good soil will produce unbelievably vigorous vines, which then
Yes.
pull your corn over.
So we use a runner
Have
bean.
nice short.
We use a half runner bean that we got from Sustainable Mountain Agriculture. So that's the organization that we went to. They go all across Appalachia and collect family varietals. And so we ended up talking to them to see what would work best with the Three Sisters plot, because for the same reason that you're talking about right now is that they pull the corn down. But we use a half runner, and I can get you the exact varietal for you if you'd like.
Email me, I can get stuff.
Yeah, and our corn is a basic feed corn. We do have some sweet corn over on the side. That's for kids, but we do have basic feed corn. And then the half runner beans, and then we have acorn and butternut squash as the base. I am trying to move to a Tennessee pumpkin pie squash, but I have to cultivate that a little more, and I'm waiting for my greenhouse, which will be in this summer. So that will replace the butternut squash next year.
How do you all?
Catherine, you mentioned your neighbors
Mhm.
and being the ecologist. Can you walk us through some of that process
Sure.
for other people who will come into that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so if you come into the situation, there's a really great program through the Tennessee Ag, or University of Tennessee Ag, called Tennessee Smart Yards. And it's really just a self-reported thing. So you go through and you have food crops, you have compost, and you have some sort of pollinator garden. If you can check off those three things, you can be certified as a Tennessee Smart Yard, and you put this metal sign right in your front yard that says, this is what I'm actually doing in my backyard. Please don't report me to the city. Because that's just going to be a headache for everybody. It's essentially a Karen sign. It's an anti-Karen sign. It has helped us because it did give us there's a big workbook that you can get, and it does give you like phases of things. So these are the 4 things that you really need: pollinators, compost, a planned garden and a food garden. And so they really like walked us through to some extent, which was very helpful. But it isn't super necessary. It's just to show the people next door that we are not actually just like living in our backyard, which we are, but they don't need to know.
So
Oh,
because
Nicole
you're,
first.
A plan, because you have that sign, if a Karen does call the inspector on you, is it a legitimate buffer or is it?
I made friends with the mayor of Nashville. That's how I did this. So the mayor's office is aware of everything that we're doing. And the reason being is because I try to be as high profile as possible. To do is connect with Knox County Mayor, formerly Kane of WWE. And he and I have actually gone to some policy conferences to talk about urban agriculture and how this really benefits people, especially if you live in a food desert. People are constantly talking about food deserts, and they're talking about food policy in a way that doesn't really connect with people, because you think about food policy as just this sort of amorphous idea. And, you know, we're sitting here and saying, I live in a city. I live in not a great part of a city. Like, I have chickens clucking in my backyard and I have gunshots six blocks away. If I can do this, literally anybody can do this in their backyard. And it's become sort of a policy thing for us. All right, he was first and then you.
This information that you got from the Tennessee Ag thing, can you post or
Yeah.
cover the information, how to get that information, who to contact? So
I will send everything to Nicole and Nicole can
Good.
post it. All of the stuff that we use too. And I've used a lot of curriculums. So if you have kids, I have lots of garden curriculums. And we're, like I said, we're expanding this into the schools, into the diocesan schools in Nashville. My kids' Catholic school noticed what we were doing and was like, can you please teach us how to do that? Can you do this again in our backyard? And so we're moving into that. So we're going to start a really basic curriculum too for people who want to start to do this, or kids who want to start to do this. We're going to get kids to proselytize to their parents and force them to become homesteaders, which I kind of love. Like, everybody's been using the public schools to get something else into the bloodstream, and we're like, go be a libertarian.
So you're gonna drive little food trucks around and say, hey kid, you want some rocks?
You want some seeds? I have some milkweed.
For your figs and your olives, are they just really frost resistant, or are you doing anything to?
We did Chicago Hardy for the figs, so they are frost resistant. The olives we're learning. We killed a bunch the first year, and now we're better able to take care of them. A lot of it is plastic. We've been putting plastic over them to protect them from frost. Any of the smaller ones will move into the greenhouse now during the summer or during the winter time so that they don't get it. We only get maybe 1 or 2 snows, but it's enough to destroy a whole crop, which they don't get in Spain. So we've had to learn just a little bit more on how to handle frost resistance and making sure that we don't. My problem this year was that I put a bunch of figs out and it froze the next day. It was totally a shock to the system, and ended up losing a bunch of fig trees. So you live and you learn, kind of. You just have to be in it for the long haul, because otherwise I just go hungry every year. Yeah.
So I love the Dickens out of this. My wife and I did something very similar for 14 years in Knoxville. So
Oh, awesome.
I want to make sure you and I exchange info so we can bat stuff back and forth. Because same thing. I went through a lot of failures, a lot of successes. I had a completely built out 5-acre urban homestead that we sold in 2019. And tomorrow I'll talk about what we did after that. But I wanted to ask if you feel like this backyard space is maximized in terms of functions, or is there still more functionality you can add to it?
I think there's way more functionality that we can add to it. I don't think this is the end. I think this is just phase 1. Phase 0, really. Like, this was throwing things at a wall, and all of a sudden I'm learning a lot of science, and I flunked science in high school, and now I'm learning science. And turns out it's a lot easier when you can see it happen. I don't think this is the end by any means. I think as my kids get older, they will want some more space in the backyard, which is going to push us to the front yard. And that's my real challenge is getting the front yard, getting people to accept that I do not want a lawn. will be a real challenge. But I think it should be. I think we've got plenty of room to grow.
Do you have a plan yet for the front yard?
No, but I will. I will publicize it when I do.
You know, they make some decorative cabbage plants that are also at
Oh, that could be really
He did-
useful.
so this is Jack from the Survival Podcast, and he did he's done several episodes on how to basically stealthily plan out
Yeah.
the front yard so it looks
Colored shards.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks like it's landscaping that you can.
And that's one of the things is like we have to be a little more stealthy because we still do live in a land of Karens. And I live in East Nashville, which is like the Portland of Nashville.
The ultimate Karen experience.
Yeah, so you have people who walk past your house and they're like, this is amazing, thank you for what you're doing. And then you have people who walk past your house and you're like, this is disgusting and I'm gonna report you to the city.
So you're friends with the mayor.
Yes.
There's someone here that does plaques. Make a plaque, the name of the mayor on it. Mayor
He has approved.
Memorial Garden Center. And put it on the gate.
I think I could find like
Engraved on it.
I feel like I'm Italian. I could find like a threatening ancestor, like, and put it up and say, yeah, a threatening ancestor in memory of. Karen. We compost everything.
That's why you need pigs.
Yeah, with a K.
You compost with a K.
I was just about to say I'm gonna have a body farm.
Pigs will eat anything.
That is actually one of the exciting parts about this is I have learned many ways to murder things. I've learned, what happens when things decompose. Like I'm ready for the perfect crime. So I mean, just watch out.
I don't care. I'm already spreading medical misinformation because what did we talk about?
Oh, what did we talk
It was
No.
no, it was
It
stupid.
was something so ridiculous.
Wasn't it the bird feeds you guys made?
Oh, we were talking about
The
Berkey
water
water
filters.
filters.
Oh, yeah.
Suit. I got a strike for that on YouTube, and they want me to take a class and take a test and then wait 90 days to not be labeled as
Dude, it
medical
takes 5
misinformation.
minutes to take a
I
class.
just was like, fuck your medical misinformation. Medical misinformation now.
When you answer your question wrong, I've done this many times. It just says, almost, try again. Just answer what you say.
It's like one of those HR questionnaires that it keeps going until you get it right. Re-education. So I won't talk about my copper situation in the basement that we'll go in a couple of, but
we can talk about that at lunch.
we can talk about that at lunch. Yeah. So that is one other thing.
There are resources here. Speaking.
That'd be amazing. So one of the big things that now we have been faced with is the amount of stuff that we grow. We can't eat it all in one summer. And my children have, dramatic opposition to green anything. So we have to do a lot of canning, preserving, drying. And that's the next step of what we've had to learn a lot of is how do we can grow the food now. What do we do with the food?
I know a lady who can help you with that.
That would be fabulous.
Yeah, we should just
do it.
Yeah.
Because we're doing a lot of canning and preserving. We made our own pickles. We made our own hot sauce for the first time last year. We've learned how to preserve green beans. We've learned how to preserve chilies. Fermenting and distilling has been a huge part of this. Fermenting first, and now we're moving off into distilling. So we're making our own miso this year, which is really feels like very high end. My husband is Hawaiian Japanese. So there was the first wave was a bunch of stuff that Italian me could cook because that's very basic, onions, garlic, and tomatoes bake all of our dishes, and then some wheat for pasta. But now we're getting into Asian foods and Asian cooking, and that is an entirely different soil microbiome and an entirely different growing system. A lot more water is involved in that. And then additionally, a lot of different fermentations. So making our own kimchi and making our own miso is all on the agenda for this year. Because, we know we've got the marinara sauce down. Now we've got to get the other 50% of the family satisfied.
Can you tell us more about your winter wheat? Like what variety? Like you mentioned that it's sectioned off. It's like 20 by 20, right?
So it's 20 by 20 and it's sectioned off. I did not draw a very good square. We'd use soft red winter wheat. So any soft red varietal, I think would grow very well. We've had no trouble with the soft red winter wheat. We planted it in October. It goes dormant over the winter. And then right now it's just about reaching where we should be harvesting it. And so we'll be harvesting it in the next couple of weeks. And then that'll keep us for a whole year in flour. We do have to mill our own flour. But if you have a KitchenAid mixer, KitchenAid just came out with a flour mill for your mixer that you can attach right on. Yeah.
Does it work well?
Yeah.
I use a Vitamix when I have
The Vitamix also works. Yeah, it's great. If you have one, I mean, the KitchenAid, the big professional KitchenAid, this was my previous bouginess, purchased a giant professional KitchenAid, and it has been the greatest part of all of this.
Does that go the professional one, or can it
No,
go on one of
any of the ones that have the screw off the front.
Yeah.
So if you can put an ice cream attachment on it, you can put a wheat milling attachment on it. Fabulous.
ice cream and wheat.
Ice cream, wheat, zucchini spiralizer. It'll make your own sausage too. I haven't tried that yet, but I know it can make your own sausage.
Don't do it.
You'll hate me.
We'll have a talk.
All right. She's like, let me disabuse you of that.
Well, just don't waste the money.
If I didn't want to waste money, I wouldn't have bought chickens. But yeah, and then what will happen is this will go fallow for about 2 or 3 weeks. We will look at the soil microbiome, do what we need to do, and then we will plant soybeans there. And soybeans are our crop for our chickens, and as well as for miso and for my husband's cooking. And my children will eat edamame right off the vine, which is one thing that you kind of have to do is like, at some point you just got to grow the food that people eat too.
Since you got approved for the smart yard thing, does that open up any financial brackets to help support?
So we have not explored that yet. Just about 2 weeks ago, we created our first LLC with a Facebook page called Headless Frank Farms. We found a headless statue of St. Francis in our backyard, and so it became Headless Frank Farms. So you can find that on Facebook. We are now forming up. Headless Frank Farms as an LLC and a nonprofit attached to that, which will help us qualify for grants and various things. I have my own nonprofit, but it's mostly for teaching. So that didn't get it. And I know the USDA is kind of going through an upheaval right now. One thing I do know is you can get the plastic greenhouses, lots of things to get you started for this, but not necessarily financial gain. If I can't do this for financial gain, I still have to have a day job.
Are you already committed to how you're implementing at your school program, like what you're?
Nope.
Because Farmer's Friend is in Tennessee, and I feel like there could be sponsorship opportunities
Yeah.
there.
This is a new thing.
Yeah.
So literally I had the meeting on Wednesday. People saw what we were doing on Facebook, and just from like posting sometimes on Facebook, sometimes on Substack, I should really do that more because that could be financial. But we started to do this and we started to share it with the kids, and it suddenly seems like, maybe faced with some economic instability and in the post-COVID era, more people are thinking about, well, what happens if something really bad happens? And that wasn't at the forefront of people's mind. I mean, it was at the forefront of my mind because I was a lunatic, but it wasn't always at the forefront of everybody's mind. And I think a lot of people are looking at that sort of the old ways of doing things and a lot of lost arts. And people saw that we were doing it and they said, well, can you bring it into our school and teach our kids how to do this so that when they get to 8th grade or whatever. And so we just started this year. We hatched chickens in the kindergarten class. So we taught them all about chickens and animal husbandry and what it takes to hatch a chicken. And then starting next fall, we'll move into basic container gardening. They put together a container garden. There's no one really doing it right now. So we're going to go and put a container garden into their school and go from there. So any curriculum assistance would be extremely helpful because
I know somebody you should talk to who did it at the high school in Nashville.
Yeah,
I'm cook from the garden.
I'm going to do middle school, so that would be really helpful.
So talking about curriculum assistance, one of the things we have worked with is a program we train people to do is called the ambassador chickens.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's actually amazing for urban, so forth. And the quick version of it is, you'll have some chickens that they're just naturally human,
Yeah.
So forth. And so we'll find chickens that have two criteria. One is they're very beautiful, they're very charismatic, and number two is they're very people oriented. And we'll train them to be ambassador chickens. And there's like a whole, I won't get into it right now, but we cut them off feed a few hours early so they're not pooping and stuff like that. There's a whole way of taking them in and using them as ambassadors. Like we'll take them into city council meetings where people are like, oh, you're going to have those dirty, nasty livestock. Now, who would want a chicken as a pet, right? And you bring in this beautiful blue Orpington that's just, wants to sit on everybody's lap and so forth.
Yep.
And people who've never actually experienced a chicken, they're like, oh my God, this is my pet, right? This is my pet chicken. And they're like, okay. And it reframes their whole way of thinking about that. The other thing is we've done, so you can also do it for educational. We've also done therapy chickens. And one of the things, and this goes into...
I have a chicken who is perfect for this. Loretta the Silky has no desire to be outside, does not believe she should be a chicken. So she's perfect for this.
This is what's interesting with this is in a lot of senior centers, people who grew up with chickens, we've seen people become responsive when you bring a chicken in who, they don't respond to much anymore. And so it's like this deep connection from their childhood.
So we have a 102-year-old neighbor on this side, and she grew up on a farm, and I noticed last summer that she was setting up a chair, and I couldn't figure out what she was doing, whether she was setting up a chair to watch my kids or just yell at them, and I was like, fine, do that. Anyone can yell at them. I don't care. But she was setting up the chair to watch the chickens in the backyard, and she wanted to know all the different breeds that we had and what their names were, and they were feeding them raspberries through the fence. But we have Loretta the chicken, who is my ambassador chicken that I bring to the school. Loretta is a silky who does not believe she should have to live outside or poop anywhere that is not clean. She would prefer to be one of those Paris Hilton purse dogs. So she's kind of perfect for it. That's awesome.
Okay, you guys can continue to talk to Emily throughout the day. She's here until about 5. We do need her to go on a wild edible walk with Carrie at some point, and somebody might want to get in on that too. So thanks, Emily, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for letting me talk about it.
We got a 15-minute break. There's coffee, beer, and then we'll come back before John Pugliano. I didn't know you would have gone that far.